Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
In this edition of Global Print, I'm going to talk to you about Afghanistan. Now, this is the second time in 2 weeks that I will be discussing Afghanistan, a country which is fighting for its very survival. But before I do that, I'd like to wish each one of you, dear viewer, a very warm and happy Eid. So Eid Mubarak, everybody, especially all of you who are watching my show in Afghanistan. May this Eid be the harbinger of peace in your country, and God knows you need it. I'd also like to take this opportunity to request each one of you to click on the join button to subscribe to ThePrint, both in India and abroad. There are several benefits for subscribers. You know that we have been bringing to you over the last several months of the pandemic the best news stories, the best videos. So please do continue to support us. The join button is right there on your screen. So once you click it, the benefits will be apparent. Now, back to my column Global Print, in which I discuss the situation, the lay of the land in Afghanistan. So let me start by telling you about a literature and poetry festival that took place in Kabul last week called The Wounds of War. And what is so interesting is that here is the Taliban that is taking territory every day. In fact, the Indian photojournalist Danish Siddiqui, who lost his life very unfortunately in Spin Boldak, which is a border crossing point between Afghanistan and Pakistan. This literature festival in Kabul was taking place only a few hours before Danish Siddiqui's death, and we mourn his passing, each one of us. But at this literature festival, an Afghan poet called Kawa Gibran, and I'm going to read to you what he said. He says, "Your pen is your weapon. You must defend all human values. It is not like the Taliban who sing the story of a massacre." So each Afghan speaking from his heart and telling his fellow citizens that you must fight not just for your life, but for the life of your country, for Afghanistan. And it is this war against the Taliban that each Afghan is now fighting. Now, in another corner, the Information and Culture Minister of Afghanistan, Qasim Wafaizada, has also warned that traffic in ancient cultural sites, especially in Samangan, in Kandahar, and in Balkh, has already started. Looting has started. Guess who? By the Taliban. Just like what happened between 1996 and 2001, when the Taliban looted, ransacked several of Afghanistan's most culturally significant archaeological treasures. Now this, the Afghanistan cultural minister is saying, has begun to happen again. And he's pointing to the partial damage by the Taliban of this stunning blue-tiled mosque in Balkh called the Abu Nasr Pasha Mosque. You can see the photos of this mosque on your screen, dear viewer. We don't know the extent of the damage so far, but this is what the Taliban is claiming. So the Afghans are already saying, let's all fight together against the Taliban. Let me also place this in the context of the fight against the Taliban by the Afghan security and defense forces. Now, the way the Afghans fight, it's very much like a seesaw battle. So in the last few days, for example, the Afghan security forces have they've taken back the territories that had fallen to the Taliban, which is parts of Kandahar, Parwan and Ghazni districts. But for example, the Chakhansur district in Nimroz province has been taken back by the Taliban. So this up and down seesaw battle of claims and reverses, which has been going for the last several weeks, is ongoing in the country. Now, what is interesting is that this territorial back and forth between the Taliban and the Afghan security forces is taking place even as in Tashkent last week, the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, in an impromptu statement, accused the Pakistani military establishment of sending 10,000 Taliban across the Durand line to fight against the Afghan security forces. Now, of course, the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, who was also present in that conference, expectedly denied this statement by the Afghan president. But it's clear that a lot of Afghans believe that. And subsequently, once he returned home, Ashraf Ghani has also recalled the Afghan ambassador to Pakistan. His name is Najibullah Ali Khil. And what happened was that over the weekend, Mr. Ambassador Najibullah's daughter, Silsila Alikhil, was picked up. She was traveling in a cab in Islamabad, and she was picked up by unknown people. She was tortured for several hours, and then she was dumped somewhere in the middle of the city. Now, this has created a furor inside Afghanistan, as you can imagine. The Pakistanis are also a bit worried. So Ashraf Ghani has recalled his ambassador back from Pakistan, back home, in what is clearly an expression of anger against Pakistan. But let's look at the international situation. Now, the US withdrawal is on track. The troops, both US and NATO troops, have been withdrawing according to schedule by September 11th, which is the 20th anniversary of the attacks in the US, in which more than 3,000 people were killed. Before that, all US troops would have left Afghanistan. But meanwhile, equally interesting things are happening. At this same connectivity conference that I spoke to you about in Tashkent, the US also announced a quadrilateral partnership between the US, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Uzbekistan. Now, if you look at the map, Uzbekistan is Afghanistan's northern neighbor. Pakistan is, of course, the southern neighbor, and the US is this big power that has held sway over the last 20 years. So what are the Americans trying to do? They're trying to make this connection which connects landlocked Central Asia via Afghanistan to Pakistan, which, as you know, has access to the seas, to the Arabian Sea via its ports in Karachi and more recently in Gwadar, which the Chinese have built. Now, you would imagine that here is Pakistan, which daily for the last 20 years has undermined the US in every way, not least by hosting several of the terrorists on its own soil in Quetta, which is also informally called the Quetta Shura. Now, a lot of these terrorists who live in Quetta then slip back into Afghan territory, create havoc and mayhem, and then come back. Now, you would imagine, or you would expect, that the Americans would have nothing to do with the Pakistanis under the circumstances. But guess what? They are once again allowing the Pakistanis to have a veto on the peace process and on the future of Afghanistan. And then there is Russia. Now, Russia in the last several weeks and months has also been playing a very interesting game in Afghanistan. First of all, Russia's envoy Zamir Kabulov has been reaching out to the Taliban. He has clearly a good equation with them. He certainly has a very good equation with Pakistan. So under his influence, the Russians have signed an agreement with Pakistan to build a gas pipeline between Karachi and Lahore, which is about 1,100 kilometers long. Now, this means that the Russians are going to invest good money into this infrastructure project. Now, you would ask yourself, why would Russia, which is supposed to be a fast friend of India, going to invest money in Pakistan, big money, which means that for the next 15, 20, 25 or 30 years, the Russians and the Pakistanis are going to be conjoined by a gas pipeline. Now, that is not a small matter. So what does that show to you, dear viewer? What it shows to me, at least, is the following, is that the US is biting its tongue. It has been very, very critical of the Pakistanis for several years, both former President Donald Trump as well as Biden, although Biden is much more low-key about this. The US establishment has been very critical of the Pakistanis, offering material support, not just diplomatic support, but also material support to the Taliban. But the fact that despite the Pakistanis doing that, the Americans have had no option but to have Pakistanis play first fiddle, similarly with Russia. The Americans also understand, they realize that China, which is a fast friend of Pakistan, in fact, it's the patron of the Pakistani state, will be able to play or will influence the future of Afghanistan in many ways because they are so closely aligned with the Pakistanis. So what happens now, and what should India do? What happens now is that the Modi government must wake up and smell the coffee. Now, perhaps I sound a bit unkind when I say that, because I'm sure the Modi government, which has very, very smart diplomats working in it know exactly what's been happening for the past several months, and perhaps, not just perhaps, they definitely anticipated something like this. So they have been smelling the coffee, not just recently, but for some time in the past. So here is what the options are in front of India, I would argue. And I imagine this is something that the Indian government is also looking at very closely. The first is to revive the 2011 Defense and Strategic Partnership Agreement between India and Afghanistan. Now, this is the first agreement of its kind that Afghanistan signed with any big player when it realized what the Pakistani establishment was actually up to, which is to pay lip service, to talk about bhaichara between Pashtun in both countries, that's Pakistan and Afghanistan, offer peace and friendship and brotherhood, but under the surface to undermine the Afghan state by hosting these terrorists on its soil. So this 2011 Defense and Security Partnership between Afghanistan and India should be revived, and the Indian government should try and help and assist the Afghans in any way they can. The second thing that I would argue is that India should support the widest possible coalition of the Afghan leadership, which has come together in the Rehbari Shura. Now, these are Afghan leaders of every ethnic community. So India should work with them, work together, and ensure that each one of them, proud patriots, sons and daughters of Afghanistan, are able to come together and fight the enemy. And who is the enemy? The enemy, is it the Taliban? Well, as long as the Taliban, remember that the Taliban are all Afghan, as long as they want power not on the barrel of the gun, but through the pen and the electoral ballot, the other Afghan leaders should come to some sort of understanding. And I would argue here that India should assist in that process. So once again, dear viewer, Eid Mubarak, a very happy Eid to all of you, and thank you so much for watching this video.